Are you struggling to create a CSS grid layout that spans multiple columns and rows? You're not alone. Today, we're diving into how to set up a grid layout box that spans 2 columns and 2 rows without the hassle of defining grid areas for each child. I totally get it. CSS Grid can be a bit tricky, especially if you're new to it. Many developers face the same challenge when trying to create complex layouts without overcomplicating their code. Here's the specific question we're addressing today. One user asked how to create a grid layout where a specific item spans 2 columns and 2 rows without needing to define unique grid areas for each item. Sound familiar? Let's explore this together. To understand this better, let's break down the CSS grid properties. The grid layout allows you to define rows and columns, but sometimes you want a specific item to take up more space without creating extra classes. This is where the magic of grid properties comes in. And stick around. At the end of this video, I'll share a quick tip that will make your CSS grid layouts even easier to manage. To create a CSS grid layout where one item spans 2 columns and 2 rows, the user should start by defining the grid container. This includes setting the display property to grid and specifying the number of columns and rows. Next, the user needs to specify the grid item that will span across 2 columns and 2 rows. This can be done using the grid column and grid row properties directly on that specific item. After that, the user should ensure that the other grid items are positioned correctly. They can simply define the remaining items without needing to specify unique classes for each. Finally, the user should test the layout in a browser to ensure that the grid displays as intended. They can adjust the grid properties as needed to achieve the desired design. Fun fact: did you know that CSS Grid was first introduced in 2011? It took a while to gain traction, but now it's a game changer for web layouts. Now let's look at the answers provided by other users. This user suggests simplifying your CSS Grid layout by removing unnecessary classes. They recommend keeping only the unique class for the grid item that spans 2 columns and 2 rows, which is Class A. The grid template areas can be defined directly in the grid parent without needing separate classes for each item. Here's a pro tip. Always remember to check your browser compatibility when using CSS Grid. While most modern browsers support it, it's good practice to ensure your layout works across different platforms. And there you have it. You've successfully created a CSS Grid layout box that spans 2 columns and 2 rows. Remember, practice makes perfect. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe for more tips and tricks.